So, I did it. I just got back from Everest and I'm absolutely delighted that I was able to get up there and do this and complete this challenge and raise some money, but I'm absolutely over the moon. I'm here, I'm back, and I'm really, really pleased that I got the opportunity to do that. Do you know what? The thing that I was really more surprised about than anything else was having to cope with altitude. That was a big one. But over in Dubai, what do you do to cope with altitude? How do you get altitude training? And that was a difficult thing. But we had some small mountains here in Dubai to climb. We've got some big sand dunes, and do you know what? We were climbing in 45 degree temperatures here in Dubai, and that made a massive difference. You know, the training in that kind of heat made a big difference.
What we did was we found this amazing sand dune called Fossil Rock, and pretty much every weekend for about a month and a half, we were found climbing up Fossil Rock. You couldn't imagine what climbing up a sand dune is like in sort of 35 degree heat, but it's pretty intense.
And then the other thing is we went to this gym that had an altitude chamber, and in the altitude chamber we trained for 90 minutes every day on a running machine, and we went up from, I don't know, I think it was 2,000 to 5,500 meters in the altitude chamber, and that was fantastic. It was really good fun, and again it's like really weird trying to cope with not having the oxygen in the air, but that, along with that tent and along with the climbing that we had the opportunity to do here in the sand dunes, meant that, to be honest with you, it was preparation as much as we could do to take on something as big as that. How do I describe Kathmandu? Unusual. If you take the people, they're amazing. If you take the city, I would say it needs a bit of work. Okay, so yeah, it wasn't the tidiest of cities in the world. Okay, so we're here in Kathmandu, just doing a bit of money changing, getting some medication, sorting some bits and pieces out, because we fly to Lukla in the morning really early. And the driving, I thought they drive like idiots in Dubai sometimes. My goodness, it was crazy seeing some of the driving going on. I remember driving down the road in the front seat of the car, and there were two cars coming towards us, one on either side, and it was like, what do we do? And Emily and I had a good laugh about that. So we're here in Nepal. We've got to Kathmandu just an hour or so ago, and the people are just so nice, like really cool. Doesn't matter who it is, everyone has been really nice to us so far. I'm here with Emily. Say hi, Emily.
Hi guys.
Hi.
Hello. Namaste.
Hello,
Hi,
namaste.
sir.
I'm Dole. Nice to meet you.
This is amazing. This really is amazing. Yes, what time is it? 7 o'clock in the morning, ready to get out on the plane. So looking forward to this. This is where it begins. When we landed, Lukla, this is where it begins. So I can't wait for it to start. We left Kathmandu, and then we had to get to the airport the following morning and take our flight up to Lukla. Lukla's the most dangerous airport in the world. It's at 2,800 meters, and you come in on this plane, but the weather was really bad. And the weather being as bad as it was meant that the flights couldn't take off, so it was foggy, and the fog wouldn't allow the flights to take off. So we sat in this very small airport for a good few hours, waiting for this opening to come. And eventually it did, but it didn't come on the plane. It only came in the form of a helicopter, so we had to take a helicopter up to Lukla. Well, at last we've got something to fly in. And I remember we got in the back of this, we had to go to the helicopter, we had to get all of us in the back of a pickup truck with all of our luggage, and we were all squashed into the back of this pickup truck, taken out to this helicopter that was on the other side of the airport. And then we went off and we flew off up to Lukla. It was about an hour's journey, but my goodness, the scenery. It was just absolutely stunning. I had a really good time looking at the scenery. We headed up to Lukla, and we got to Lukla, and it was kind of like, okay, what do we do now? And we met our Sherpas. We're here. We made it. We're now in Lukla. It's yeah, pretty amazing out here. Fantastic, like mega scenery. And yeah, very cool dudes indeed. Very, very nice young men. The strength they had, how they were carrying the bags. 25 kilos they were carrying kind of like on a band across their head with the bags tied to their back. It was incredible to see their strength. I had to go at it, and it was like, about 100 meters, I think it was, that I could actually go with the bag on my head. But yeah, they're very, very strong indeed. And we left Lukla, and the surprising thing was we'd flown up to 2,800 meters. We had to walk down on the first day. So the walk on the first day was down to a place called Phakding. And we got to Phakding on the first day, and it was almost like, this isn't so hard, this isn't so challenging, but little did I know what was coming on the second day.
And I remember getting to this place called Phakding, and Spencer saying, is this kind of going to get started yet, or kind of is this how it's going to be? Because I thought we were climbing. And I, to be honest, silently agreed, and I was thinking, where's the challenge? I don't feel any lactic acid in my legs right now.
Nice shower, nice and hot, nice and clean, nothing better than being clean, okay, and we're going to go down to the waterfall. And the biscuits were good, yeah, the biscuits were good. And we're going to go down to the river now, okay, and go and have a look at that, because it looks really awesome. Whitewater Rapids down there, kind of get a good idea of what's going on there.
Then, you know, we have an overnight, and the next day the guides are like, right, are you ready? Did you sleep well? And I'm like, well, yeah, but I don't know that there's going to be any challenge here. And then, of course, it was literally 9 hours of solid climbing up, I think, about 800 meters of vertical ascent to a place called Namche Bazaar. So that was when I started to think, actually, no, this is not a holiday. This is a boot camp of a very, very specific kind.
So we left Phakding. That was at the end of day one. So yeah, Phakding, day two, we left Phakding, and we had to go to a place called Namche Bazaar. Now, Namche Bazaar is quite well known as far as I've learnt. It's kind of like the biggest of the villages up on the mountain. But day two's climbing, my goodness, we experienced some things we hadn't experienced. So number one, we had to go up a very, very steep climb that day. So I think we climbed 800 meters on that day. The first bridges we had to cross as well, and there were these awesome, awesome bridges that were really high that we had to cross as well, that were kind of like a suspension bridges. So where are we right now? Well, we're going up the top of that place over there. We're going to that top bridge up there. We've got to get across that now. It's fantastic out here. I keep going on about the nature, I keep going on about the scenery, but I cannot stress enough how amazing it is here. And you want to see some of the stiff stuff people are carrying along the way. There was one guy on his back had a sofa, another guy had a bed. I saw another guy carrying construction materials along the way, and it's just like, there's no cars, there's no engines, there's nothing up there. And so the only way you transport stuff is either on your back or with the yaks. And there were the yaks, yeah, they were great as well. So you'd have these kind of like herds of yaks in a line coming towards you, 10 or 20 of them at a go. They'd all have bells on so you could hear them in the distance, and they'd all be carrying huge amounts of weight as they came through. It was really great because you just had to get out of their way. They came towards you, they had their horns, and it was like, get out of the way, the yaks are coming. But yeah, that was really cool. But the climb up to Namche Bazaar, wow, my goodness. That was seriously, seriously tough on that second day. It's a long way up, seriously up a long way, and the trail was dirt and mud along the way as well. It was, yeah, it was really challenging, and it was a great relief to get into Namche and to see this kind of like this mini civilization after being in the wilderness all day long. It's been a hard walk today. It's definitely been a hard walk today. Lots of very steep hills. I think we've climbed, what have we done? 600 metres?
Like 700 since lunch.
800 metres. So we've got up 800 metres today from where we started. So yeah, that's quite a climb for us today. And how far have we trekked? 800 metres up, but what was the distance? From here? From Phakding to here?
Distance 9.8 kilometers.
So 10 kilometres almost, 9.8 kilometres, and yeah. So we get to Namche Bazaar, and the first thing we see as we come into this little kind of like village is all the women out doing their washing. And it was really cool to see them with the waterfall coming down, how they were doing the washing. And I thought they were washing in kind of warmish water. And I put my hands in the water, it was absolutely freezing, it was bitterly cold. But we were kept by our guide in Namche Bazaar for that next day because we had to acclimatise, and it's really important that you do acclimatise, because if you get acclimatisation issues and you can basically get sick with something called hypoxia, which is a lack of oxygen going into your system. Everything you can see here has had to be brought up either by hand or on yaks. Every single brick they make here, every single brick is rock that's shaped into the size of a block by the guys doing what they do. They really think about everything they do, and because of where they are, everything has got to be done by hand. Just imagine the amount of time, effort and energy that goes into this kind of stuff. Incredible. What was good that next day though is that we had to get up very early the next morning on that acclimatization day, because Dole, our guide, his name was Dole, he was like, right, get up early, it's 4 o'clock, let's go and see Everest and we'll get our first view of it. And I was like, whoa, I'm so excited about that. We're just outside of Namche Bazaar. We're here at the statue which commemorates all the work that the Sherpas did, and beyond the statue is something that's a little bit cooler than that, because this is what we came here for, and that is Mount Everest, which is up there if you can see in the distance. We're going to be trekking towards that mountain and getting quite a long way up it, and it's quite a challenge, as most people that have been there know, but we're really looking forward to it. Getting up this time of day and seeing these kind of views is amazing. I can see it in the distance and it's pretty cool. I can't wait to get close to it. That's what I'm really going to get excited about, being on Mount Everest. So we got up 4 o'clock and we went out across from where Namche was, across the other side of the area, I don't know what you would call it, and then we saw our first view of Mount Everest, and it just absolutely just took my breath away. Today is acclimatization day. We're going to go up and then we're going to come down. And then for the rest of the day, we went and climbed. We went to the world's, I think they call it the world's highest mountain, which is a place that you can go, you climb up there and you get there, and there's this small kind of hostel hotel, very simple place. And we had a coffee there and we could get another view of Everest again then, and that was just amazing. We sat there at lunchtime, the sun was there and it warmed us up, and we saw Everest in the distance, and yeah, all of the other ones out there too. And it was just a very special day. And it kind of like was my first day of really kind of getting to grips and understanding what I was taking on, and really kind of realizing how lucky I was to be there. As we kind of headed out from Namche Bazaar, we started to go over some really big bridges, really high up bridges. I remember seeing 2 bridges, one was above the other one, and I was like, which one are we climbing across? And the guide had said it was the top one. And before then we'd seen this kind of river that had come down the mountainside, and we'd followed the path of the river. But as we went over this bridge, you could see it must have been 300 meters down to the river below. And it was just like so high, you couldn't believe it. 2 days ago, yeah, it was 2 days ago, we were walking down by this river behind me here, which you can see down the bottom. That's where we were. Now we're at just around 4,000 meters at the moment and going higher. And when you look down and see how far down that is, it's quite remarkable how far we've come in such a short space of time. We're nowhere near where we need to go yet, because we're still below the tree line, and we'll be going much higher than that. And I remember we carried on past there, and we stopped for something to eat. And I said to the guide, where are we heading? And he said, can you see that monastery in the distance? And I'm like, well, there was a speck in the middle of nowhere. He's like, we're heading up there. And I'm like, what, from here? We're going there? And he's like, yeah, we are. So you might be wondering what we eat en route to Everest and the kind of cuisine that's available here. Pretty much every day we have fried potatoes with some vegetables, kind of curried flavour, which all right, but it's other stuff in other places. And then we started to go past 4,000 meters, and that's when we all knew that things were about to get very serious. We didn't need to say anything. You could taste it in the air, and you could taste the fact that there was no oxygen, or less oxygen, sorry, and you kind of had to breathe harder just to get oxygen into your lungs, and it had started to get very serious, and we knew again after that we weren't going to be far away from getting to the top of the tree line. And so as we head to where we're going, it's starting to get a bit more barren There's still vegetation that you might be able to see in the distance behind the clouds, the mountains that we're heading for. And you know, if you get to the top of the tree line, then there's no oxygen being produced by the trees. So as you push up past that tree line, it starts to get very thin indeed, the air. And you really have to battle not only with the physical challenge, but just getting that air in your lungs, you know, and trying to breathe. I remember sleeping in our sleeping bags in our tea houses, which are these very, very simple pieces of accommodation made out of plywood. I remember being in the sleeping bag at night and just having constant issues with insomnia, because you'd fall asleep and you'd wake up and you'd fall asleep and you'd wake up every 30 minutes, every hour. And you'd do that because you weren't getting oxygen in, so your body was waking up looking for oxygen. But we met some amazing people along the way. There was a guy called Adam, a guy called Siddharth. He was just great. You know, he'd been over in a Shaolin temple in China, of all places, learning Kung Fu, and then he decided to come and climb Everest.
So I decided to basically just challenge myself physically as well as mentally. And that's when I decided to basically just completely break free. And so I went on to this amazing journey. I went to China to learn traditional Kung Fu, and went to this place which was like completely isolated from rest of the world, had absolutely no contact on Facebook and WhatsApp and nothing. It was just getting up early in the morning, training, and it was kept on doing for almost more than 6 months. And,
to stay sunk or float or fly, and I decided to fly. Yeah. Cool, so cool. It was really cool meeting interesting people with interesting stories. To keep ourselves occupied at night, an interesting game was played, a game called Uno, which I'm sure many people know about. We played Uno, and I tell you what, we had to teach our guy Dol how to play Uno. And one game in, he started to become a hustler. It was like he had beginner's luck and he was whooping us. It was really funny. Aaron was getting really angry, I was getting frustrated. It was just a game, but the stakes were so high in those moments. It was very cool. Thereafter, I started to notice how cold it was getting for other people. So Amma, the cameraman, always had a coat on from that stage. And I didn't feel it as much, maybe because I was wearing thinner layers underneath, but you started to kind of get this crispness in the air that you felt really strongly during the evening. It cleared up a little bit in the middle of the midday sun, but the rest of the time it started to be very chilly. And then that's when we started to see the trees die away. So we came to a place called Pheriche, and we got to Pheriche and you could just see there were no more trees. There were some bushes and still some vegetation, but there was no more trees. And it started to become very barren and very bleak and very kind of wilderness, and you started to kind of be in awe of the beast that was this mountain in the distance. It's kind of like the fear you get when you start to realize how serious what you're doing is. We went on from there, and then we went to a place called I think it was called the Tukla or the Lukla Gate, where there's a place at the top of this hill where there's all of the memorials of all the people that have died, people whose names you haven't heard of, but also people that from the famous movie Everest, the people that died there. There's memorials for those guys. Expedition leader Rob Hall, and if you've ever seen that movie Everest, you'll know that this was the guy who had a pregnant wife back home and lost his life on the mountain when a storm came in, along with the tragedy when many others were lost as well. Rob was an accomplished climber and somebody that was looked up to by being on Everest for many, many years. And it was so sad to see that he's lost his life in that way. But here's 1 hour to Tengboche, so that's where we've got to head to. Here is a very, 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 I suppose, moving place with all of these memorials, all that's happened here. It really is a testament to the fact that this mountain is a beast and you should respect it enormously. A very eerie place, obviously, because there's lots of memorials of dead people, but also a place where I think you need to learn to respect where you are. You know, to see so many people have died up there, and it's not people that have just climbed to the top of Everest, it's people in various places along the way that have got themselves into difficulty. Some people have died from altitude sickness, etc. And to see that happen and see those memorials was a real kind of quiet, introspective moment for us when we sat there looking at that. it was very, very eerie. But also, by the time we'd got there, there were no more trees, there was no more vegetation. It was just rock and shale and dirt, and there was literally, you were walking across big boulders, and that's really what you were doing. And the other thing is to keep the tea houses warm, the kind of main room in the tea house warm overnight, they have these kind of like what we would call wood burner, and the wood burner has fuel in it, and the fuel they use is yak poo, yak dung. So they dry, the yaks go to the toilet, they dry the dung out, and then they burn the dung, and the dung is actually quite a bad smelling thing, but you get used to it. But that's what they use to burn things to create the warmth. It's really interesting they do that. We kept going and we kept going and we kept going, and eventually we got to the place which was kind of like the big, we're almost there place, and that's when we hit a place called Gorakshep. And Gorakshep really is in the middle of nowhere. It's the highest point on the mountain where there's any form of anything, so heating, hot water, cold water, any food at all. So that's the place you can go to. When you get to that place, you know you got your last leg to do after that, or you're almost there. We overnighted there, we had a good night's sleep. No, we didn't get a good night's sleep. We slept there without getting a good night's sleep. I remember Amma didn't eat anything, so we were worried about him. And then the next morning, very early at 4 o'clock, Dole and our guides took us to Kala Pathar, which was the highest point of our climb, which is 5,800 meters. So we went to Kala Pathar, and that was without a doubt the toughest climb of all when we went there. That was without a doubt really, really tough. First of all, we were doing it in the dark. Secondly, it was really steep. Thirdly, there was no air, okay? And lastly, Emily, I think, had lost her sense of humour on the last part of it. She wasn't so well. And so it was a real struggle just to get up there.
The reality for the last day is that you kind of climb this thing called Kala Pathar to get a view. It's very high, it's tough, you leave in the middle of the night, and then you come down from there and you go to base camp. Normally you do that in 2 days. We decided to do it in one morning. That's kind of how we roll. And I love the idea of that challenge. However, the reality is that you get up at 3 and you're climbing up a vertical with virtually no oxygen in the middle of the night, having had virtually no sleep and having eaten, in my case, kind of biscuits and tea for the last 2 days. I'll be honest, I found every minute of that climb the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. I struggled to breathe. I felt sick from hunger. It was dark and cold.
We're at the top of Kala Pathar, 5,550 meters, way up in the sky, way above base camp, and we made it, Em! We made it! Yeah! It's 6 o'clock in the morning, we're freezing cold, I can hardly breathe, but we made it! Yeah! And Dole, our guide, was really hilarious. He's like, right, we could either go back to Gorakshep and then we can go over across to base camp, or we can take a shortcut. And Emily and I are like, yeah, let's take the shortcut. My goodness, that was no shortcut. It was horrendous. We had to walk down and up and down and up across these boulders and these rocks, loose rocks. It was dangerous. And I remember Emily was like one of my kids every 5 minutes saying, "Are we nearly there yet? Are we nearly there yet?" But it was really, really, really challenging. And then a few hours later, we eventually made it to base camp, and we were chuffed to bits because we'd got there. It was beautiful over there. You could see this Khumbu icefall. We were staring at the beast itself. Mount Everest was looking down at us, and we were literally there with just so much joy in our faces, just so happy that we'd actually been able to do what we set out to do, which was to go to base camp and then go one higher than base camp, which was up to Kala Pathar. So we've made it. We got here and we are at Everest Base Camp. Earlier on today we went to Kala Pathar and we climbed there some 5,600 almost meters. We've come down a little bit from there here to base camp, which is our last stop before we go back to Gorakshep and get our flights back back to Dubai. This Khumbu icefall is absolutely incredible. If you look up in the distance as it goes up, that's where the climbers that go to the summit of Everest take their journey. So they'll go across the glacier and then they'll go up, and it's very dangerous, apparently, extremely dangerous. And sadly you can't, because there's a bit of cloud there, you can't see the top of Everest right now. However, it has shown its face to us a few times today, and hopefully we'll get another chance to look at it before we go. But we are in one incredible place. I mean, genuinely what an incredible place. It's been tough on all of us. We've had to work really hard. We've had to dig deep. Some people have suffered with altitude issues. Some people are just absolutely exhausted from the journey. We've climbed so high, 5,500 meters. Just imagine how hard that must have been to climb. There's really low levels of oxygen in the air as well, so you're constantly breathing deeply. You've constantly got a headache when you're trying to deal with it. But during the season, this is typically full of tents. There's loads and loads of tents all the way along here, where all of the guys that are climbing Everest itself to the summit, that's where they'll camp before they head off to the Khumbu Icefall and get up from there. Quite spectacular. I'm glad, really glad, that it's a clean and tidy place when they're not here. Fantastic. I can't believe it. I did it. We did it. It's awesome.
Okay, so I've achieved something from my bucket list. I've always dreamed of being here. I couldn't have imagined how hard the climb would be this morning, because we decided to do Kala Pathar first and then come through apparently a shortcut, which I don't believe it was a shortcut, to base camp. It took everything out of me, but the reward was huge to see this amazing landscape. And briefly, whilst we sat down, the cloud cleared and we saw Everest, which is really rare. You don't normally see her from base camp. Honestly speaking, I felt very, very unwell during much of the climb today, but I'm glad about that, because it's made me understand what it takes to embark on climbing something like this. And I've been saying, I'm going to do it, but I need a lot of work to go on first before I'm fit enough to do such a thing. But I'm just so glad to be here, and thanks to all the guys that got us here, basically. When I got to the camp itself and saw the prayer flag, saw the Khumbu Icefall, heard the noises of the ice popping, it was a moment I'll never forget, honestly, and it would be hard to find something that would kind of top that. I'll go looking for it, of course, but that's something unforgettable. And that massive sense of achievement that you've pushed your body, your amazing body's coped, you're still standing, you can still take a selfie, and you can make it back to the lodge. All massively important things, and just an overwhelming sense of relief that I'd got there and I'd done it. And yes, it was as beautiful and as mind-altering as I imagined.
I remember getting to base camp and there being this sense of euphoria, like I've mentioned before, but what was really cool was that we kind of all got there together in the end. We all made it to base camp. Even though Amma didn't come to Kala Pathar, he got to base camp even though he was sick. Dole was with us, our Sherpas were with us, and there was this real kind of unity that together we'd got there and we'd done this together, and it was a very cool feeling. I really enjoyed that feeling of just us being there together, our team. We set out to do something and we achieved it, which was really fantastic. It was a good time. Saying that though, along the way we couldn't talk to anyone because we had no communications. So I'm busy trying to make phone calls, because bizarrely on Everest, when you get to base camp, for some crazy reason they've got 3G, not 4G but 3G. So I was able to make a phone call, and I called my wife to let her know I was there. And she'll always think, why on earth would I do something like this? I mean, she's always like that. She's like, well, why do you need to do it? And I think that, number one, it's the physical challenge to go and say that you've done something like that, and test yourself. Number two, really, because there's a psychological challenge as well, getting your mind over matter and proving you can do anything you set your mind to. And then I suppose it comes down to me wanting to do my best to support the charities that I care about so much. The Dubai Centre for Children with Special Needs here in Dubai, and my friend Kim, who has a charity in Kenya, an orphanage, and he was an orphan himself, not Kenya, sorry, Uganda. And down in Uganda, that orphanage needs money for these kids that have got no parents and they've got no future and no hope without this. So that's something I care about as well. And so it gives you real purpose and drive to say, I want to do it and I want to prove these things. And I think that, it's important to remember that this is the beginning. It really is the beginning, as opposed to just a one-off experience. One of my dear friends, Alex Flynn, has got Parkinson's and was diagnosed at the age of 36. The youngest diagnosis of Parkinson's was a 6-year-old girl. Anyway, Alex decided he wanted to raise £1 million for the Parkinson's Trust. So he decided to run 1 million meters around the world.
Wow.
And I'm going to wear his he's 10 million, sorry, a million meters, 10 million meters.
10 million meters.
10 million meters, which is 6,500 miles.
Wow.
And I think he's an amazing guy. He lives in Texas at the moment. He's an English guy, and we did some work together, and I think he's just an awesome fella. And so, Alex, this is for you. So, yeah, overall it's been, without a doubt, for me, a dream, okay, a trip of a lifetime, and something that I really urge everybody, if you ever got the chance, you should jump at it with both hands. I'm kind of thinking that I should have done this years ago. How beautiful is this?
Yeah.
Bridge number 2. So many people have self-limiting beliefs. So many people have excuses for why they're not where they want to be. Just continually you hear it. Excuse after excuse after excuse. The bad story here and the bad story there. It goes on and on and on. But you know what? You can do anything you set your mind to, and it's about time you tried.